What's up, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of the Scouting Combine here on the Five Reasons Sports Network. We have a great show for you today, and it's all leading up to the NFL draft. We're going to be talking about a lot of position groups in the lead up to the NFL draft. And today we have PFF's Trevor Sikkema. Trevor, how are we doing today, my guy?
I am doing great. I appreciate you having me on the show. This is, I think, the second time we've been able to link up for a podcast, and so I was excited that you invited me back to have me back on, man. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, it's always fun to talk with you, chop it up with the draft as well. We're both huge draft nuts as well. So
Right.
why don't we go ahead, get right onto the beef of this and the NFL Combine, man. It's the biggest event of the NFL draft before the NFL draft even happened. So we're gonna go straight up into some takeaways. And the first thing I saw was the 40 time, right? I mean, it was insane. It was insane. It was a speedy track in Indianapolis. Now, people are debating, it was either, the draft training industry, they trained these players so well that they knew exactly what to expect, or are the players just that good?
I think that it might be a little bit of a combination of both. So there's a lot that goes into this, right? I think that they replaced the turf in Indianapolis for the first time in a
Uh-huh.
long time last year, and obviously there was no combine last year because of COVID-19 and everything that was going on with that. So we didn't get to see guys run last year. So the first time that we really got to see guys run on this new track was this year. So there was that goes into it. When you have a new track, it's a little stickier, it's a little bit more control, you get a little bit more pop, you can have some more speed with it. And people say that turf is faster anyways. So that goes into it. They also had someone new running the clocks. It wasn't
Yeah.
Charlie Casserly, who normally does it and has done it for years and years and years for the NFL. It was someone else who was doing it. So they switched over for the first time. So somebody else was kind of on the stopwatch, if you
Was
will,
it you?
starting these guys. It was
Well,
not me. It was not me. It was not me. I kind of wish it was, because I wish that I wish that I held that power. I really did, but it was not me. So that kind of goes into it as well. I do think this is just a fast class. Like, I think there are a lot of guys in this class who are really fast, but some of the times were a little sus. Like, some of these guys, I saw them running in the high 4.3s. I'm like, that's not,
huh? You're
yeah,
like,
like
what?
that's not a high 4.3 player. And so I don't know. I think that a lot of those things go into it, but it is really funny. You mentioned the training, and I think the training is certainly, as the event has become bigger and bigger and bigger and more emphasized every single year, training, like you said, gets a lot better. And I don't know if you've ever tried to run a 40-yard dash, like, for fun. I have a couple of
I
times. I think
did. I did it at the College Football Hall of Fame in Atlanta last week, and my time was like 6.34.
okay, well, did they make you get, like, down into the stance?
No,
Because
they didn't.
so, like, that's the weirdest part to me. Is I tried to, when I was doing it, and I did this, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, and I ran like wow, man, it was like a 5.2 or a 5.3. I was slow. I was like lineman slow. But so the most awkward part for me is getting in that track stance, that starting stance. And so
Right.
it's so funny. Like, you get some of these guys who are clearly very fast when they have a helmet and pads on, but when they have to get into this weird track stance, some of them, it kind of like kills their speed, if you will.
Right.
And it's very funny how we look at a guy who runs a 4.39, completely different than a player who runs a 4.52. And that is tenth of a second slower. It's like,
Yeah.
it's such a fraction. You know what I'm saying? If those guys were both running in a race, it would almost be a photo finish. But we look at those guys so differently. So I think it's a combination of all of these things. I think the training is getting a lot better with these guys, getting them more comfortable in that track stance, allowing them to start better, allow them to finish better, of course. So I think that it's a fast class. I think that it was a new track. I think there was somebody who might have been a little trigger happy on the clock this year with their first time doing it. And then, yeah, like you said, I think the training is really great too. But it made for an entertaining event, man. There were a lot of big tweets and all caps and excitement and everything that went along with it.
I think it may have been your previous co-host Benjamin Solak. He wanted to see a lot of these people scoot like crazy, man.
It's true. That is his catchphrase too. So that would check out, that it would be him who would say that.
Do you think maybe some of these drills and these drills may change in the future?
Yeah, I do. So this year was the first year that they had a lot of these drills in prime time, right? Normally
Right.
they're on in the early morning, and it didn't seem very player friendly. For
Mhm.
example, the way that they did it this year is they had players bench in the morning the same day that they were doing on field
Yeah.
drills and athletic testing later that night. And a lot of the agents told their clients, the players, don't max out bench 225 the morning that you're supposed to go through these events. Like that's pointless. And so I could probably count on two hands the total number of
Yeah,
players
right.
who benched, especially the skill position players. Nobody wanted to bench. And so I wonder if that gets, moved around, if they care about that at all. You get to the field and obviously you have guys run 40. Everybody's going to run the 40 because it's the flashy thing. It's the thing that everybody talks about. But if you notice, and I know a lot of people notice this out there as well, there were no running backs who ran 3-cone drills and agility drills. And that wasn't because all of the running backs just, like unionized and said, well,
Yeah.
we're not going to run the agility drills. What it ended up being was it was midnight by
Mhm.
the time these guys were supposed to run the 3-cone. And essentially, they wake up at 6 in the morning every single morning that they are at the combine because they've got
Right.
medical checks, they've got interviews, whether it's interviews with teams, whether it's interviews at the podium with the media, all this stuff. And so these guys are waking up, the alarm's going off at like 5:30, 5:45 in the morning. And you want these guys to run a athletic test 18 hours later, being exhausted, running on
Not to
fumes.
mention they have their own training regimen as well. They have
Right,
nutrition, the
right.
times they're supposed to work out as well. It's that comfortability factor that also um, not a lot of people take into account over these numbers as well.
And so that's why a lot all of the running backs said, no, we're not doing it. We're going to save it for pro day. And so, like, to go back to your original question, I think the NFL liked the fact that a lot of these drills were at prime time. I think they liked the fact that the 40s were in prime time, right? You had a
Yeah.
lot of social media reaction and people freaking out about all the fast times and everything. But it clearly was not what is best for the players.
Right.
So I'm not sure who has the ultimate say, whether it's the TV people who are saying, nope, we're going to keep it on prime time because we liked it there, or obviously the players and the agents who are going to say, hey, you can keep it here if you want, but my client's basically just going to run the 40 and nothing else. Like, we're not going to bench. We're not going to do on-field drills. We're not going to do the agility drills. And we're just going
Right.
to save all that stuff for pro day. And will they care that the combine is less of an event, if you will, or do they just care about the 40 being on prime time? I guess we'll have to see as things move on.
We'll have to see what happens next year and the years next. But let's go ahead dive deep into some of the players we saw at the combine and people who are having their pro days. One of the biggest winners, in my opinion, was Christian Watson, and I've been on his hype train since last summer. You recently wrote an article on him saying that he's a top 50 lock. You compare that to last summer, and you're like, holy moly! Like, how did this guy become so good? But you look at his physicals, you look at his traits, you watch the tape. It's eye opening. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, but Trevor, what else did he do to earn a top 50 lock honor from you? And do you think NFL teams feel the same way?
Yeah, so I mean, you kind of mentioned it there. I mean, his tape is a lot of fun. Coming from NDSU, it's a run-heavy offense. So he
Right.
didn't get a lot of buzz going into this draft season because he just doesn't have the stats. I think he had 43 catches this past year, 34 the year before, never gone over 1,000 yards, never really been close. I think 800-ish is the closest that he went, but he's never been a takeover wide receiver in that regard because the offense has never asked him to be that. Instead, he does a lot of blocking. He has a lot more all-around game to him, but nobody really knew who he was
Right.
going into this past January. And he goes to the Senior Bowl and he absolutely cooks basically every single corner that was there all 3 days. And the third day, he was one of the most unguardable players at the Senior Bowl I've seen in a long, long time, especially from the wide receiver position. So that got him on a lot of people's radars. And then he showed up at the combine, an official 6'4", 208 pounds. Okay, great. He checks the size box and then he runs like a 4.36 and jumps out of the gym in the vert and the broad. And you go, holy cow, this guy's fast. This guy's explosive. He's got blocking experience. He's got size. He's got
And
everything, man.
everything he showed numerically shows up on tape
It
too.
does. It
And
does.
it's just like a perfect match. You're just like, this guy's gonna be something, man.
And now the potential is there, right? And
Yeah.
when we look at the size and the athletic profile, and you saying that like the tape kind of matches, it does. I think that you definitely see those numbers within his tape, but he is still raw. Like when it
Yeah,
comes to
which
route
is
running and setting
crazy.
people up and discipline and all like technique, things like that, he is still a pretty raw receiver with route running and being a master in that regard. So the reason why I don't consider him a first round lock is because kind of the second part of your question. I haven't heard that from the NFL. However, when you talk about top 50, that's 18 picks after pick 32, which is the final pick of the first round. So you're talking about middle of the second round. Christian Watson should absolutely go before the middle of the second round. Even if you sit here and you go, some teams might not consider him a bona fide first round pick.
Right.
Every team in the NFL should consider him a second round pick at minimum, I think. Especially when you look at the potential there. So that's why that I say he's a top 50 lock. He brings a lot of things together, and there is a chance that he does go in the first round.
Ooh, spicy. I came away impressed with Pierre Strong Jr. and James Cook. Which player out of those two do you think has a strong chance of being a potential Miami Dolphin?
Yeah, so Dolphins, obviously, they had a running back need going into the offseason. The guy, Chase Edmonds, they have Raheem Mostert, right? So they beefed it up a little bit in free agency. So they give themselves a little bit of flexibility there with when they add a running back. But I still think that they're going to, and I think both of these guys will be firmly on their radar. When you look at Pierre Strong Jr. from South Dakota State, if it weren't for the COVID-adjusted season in 2020, he would have had 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons from freshman all the way to senior. So this dude has a ton of great production. He's got great long speed, man. If you want a home run threat, I think that this guy's one of the best in the class to get. And so I think that, he should be absolutely on the Dolphins' radar, especially with a running back room where, they're going after Mostert, and Mostert is what? He is that home run hitter, right? He suffered injuries in the past, which have kind of held him back from being on the field and being able to show that more. But with them going after Mostert, it makes me think, okay, this is their mold a little bit. Maybe they want to get faster in the backfield. And so if that's the case, I think Pierre Strong Jr. is going to be on their radar. And James Cook, man, it's so funny. You watch this guy play. Shoot, you listen to him talk. You look at him at the podium. He is Dalvin Cook. He looks just like his brother, whether the helmet is on or the helmet is off. And he has that same running style. The only thing is, he's just about like 20-ish pounds less than Dalvin. And that means 20 pounds less of breaking tackle ability and explosiveness and speed. So it's almost like Dalvin is the Super Mario mushroom ability from what James Cook is. But that's to say, like, I really like his game. I like his skill set. And, at Georgia, they've had a lot of running backs that they've rotated through with their deep rotation there. And James Cook has always seemed to find a role as a third down kind of receiver, speedy scat back player. So I think that is still going to be what he is going to really have success with, butter his bread, if you will, at the next level. And so if they want more of that kind of a target, a third down specialist, I think he'll be on their radar as well.
Now, there is, of course, a lot of SEC bias within the NFL, primarily coming from Georgia and Alabama. I was looking at Tennessee's crop of wide receivers, and I was really intrigued by Velus Jones Jr. And his 40 number stood out to me, but then you look at his tape, you watch the Senior Bowl practices, you watch what he did at Tennessee, and I'm like thinking, can he become a wide back in the NFL?
So wide back, I'm assuming that you mean the Deebo Samuel kind of position, right? Where you're using him as a wide receiver, running back, basically everything. And my answer to that is yes. And I don't want people to freak out about that. Like I'm calling this guy the next Deebo Samuel.
No.
But the reason why I say that about Velus Jones is because he, I think, is going to make his mark on special teams, especially early on in his career. He's a really good special teams player, and he's just a good athlete. Ran a 4.3 140-yard dash, had good explosive scores as well. He has good size, like all-around size. He's not the tallest wide receiver. I believe he's right around 6 foot, 6 feet and a half, and then he's got a little bit more bulk, like he's around like 205, 210-ish. So he gives you that body size of a player who brings good athleticism and the ability to play not only inside and out from a wide receiver spot, but also perhaps in the backfield as well. So he presents you with this opportunity. And I think that having an open mind with Velus Jones and his athleticism is going to be smart anyways, because if you are using him as a special teams player to kind of make the roster, you're going to want to be able to put him in a variety of different spots because he's not going to claim a starting wide receiver spot. He's not
Right.
going to claim a starting running back spot. So just get creative with him. Use him in a lot of different ways. Maybe have 1, 2, 3 plays that involve Velus Jones going into the game plan every single week. And if you get to it and if you get that opportunity, maybe you can get something out of him. So it's funny you use the wide back label, but I do think that having that versatility with him is going to be smart because I think he'll make a team first and foremost for special teams.
That's good to hear. Now we'll go up to the highly debated quarterback draft class. From what I've heard is that there's been a couple of quarterback rankings already. I think we could argue this a little bit if you want to, if our numbers don't align. But Malik Willis at number 1, Kenny Pickett at number 2, Sam Howell at 3, Ritter at 4, and Corral at 5. But Strong is a bit of the wild card because of his knee situation. Are your rankings aligned with that?
I think my tape rankings would be a little bit different with those. But in terms of where you think they're going to be drafted, I think that's a pretty good order. I really do. I think that Malik Willis is going to be QB1. I think Pickett probably presented the best tape this past year. So you got to think that he'll probably be number 2 off the board. I think the NFL likes Sam Howell a decent amount. I really do. So I think that there's a chance that he is that next quarterback in if we're going to get 3 quarterbacks in the first round, maybe right at the beginning of the second round, around like where Jacob Eason was kind of picked. Desmond Ritter, probably that same thing. And then Matt Corral, I don't really know. I really don't know a lot about Matt Corral because there hasn't been a lot of talk outside of the simple questions where people talk about him being in a Lane Kiffin offense. And it just, that's the part where I don't know if people really believe in him because I just have not heard a lot of talk about Matt Corral. It's been a lot of talk about Howell and Willis and what to make of Pickett's hand size and how high of a floor Desmond Ritter might have. And obviously like the knee injury surrounding Carson Strong and where you put him on a board. I just haven't heard a lot from Matt Corral. And maybe the NFL really likes him and they're just like being super quiet about him. But I don't know.
Because
that's one
Lane Kiffin's offense is one of the most quarterback friendly offenses known to mankind, right? But could there be particular questions about Corral's ability to fit into a pro-style offense?
I think people might worry about the learning curve with him a little bit. And I want to say with Corral, I mean, he's got that confidence, man. He's got that moxie. Like the dude's a tough son of a gun. And I think that a lot of teams are going to love what he brings, the fearlessness that he brings as a passer and as a runner as well, because Ole Miss leaned on him heavily. So, for as much as Lane Kiffin does make it easy for his quarterbacks, Matt Corral took advantage and he played with full confidence. It was a lot of fun to watch. Now, when you play in Lane Kiffin's offense, when we talk about it being quarterback friendly, there's not a lot of unstructured things that you normally have to do. The offense is so fast. It is designed to, we call a play, we have a read. If it's open, hit it here, hit number 2. If not, if that's not open, you're taking off and you're scrambling, you're sliding, you're getting a couple extra yards. And we are back in, well, they don't huddle, but we are back at the line of scrimmage immediately and we are calling our next play. So a lot of what Corral does, yes, he has to read the defense, but at the same time, like it's kind of just like this or that. Like it's literally just like this or that. And like, right. And it's just very quick. It's very muscle memory. There's not a ton of going through progressions, if you will, elaborately reading defenses, hanging around in the pocket. And you can point parts of Corral's career where that did happen. It just doesn't happen a lot. It wasn't a snap by snap commonality with him. And so that's where I think it's not like the dude can't play. I just think it's going to be a little different for him playing under an NFL style that is not as like RPO and quick hit and fast tempo like it was at Ole Miss.
And with Strong being the wild card, especially with this knee, the medicals, they certainly do take a big toll on a prospect's evaluation. You got to think about his arm, man. I think he has the best arm in the class, but do you think just that knee issue wouldn't allow him to be maybe the second or third quarterback taken?
So I interviewed Strong about a month and a half ago. And I asked him, I was like, hey, people are going to hear all about your knee, but I would rather hear it from you. What happened? What's the injury? All that stuff. And he talked about how when he was a kid, he believes something happened where he hurt his knee a certain way, probably never got it checked out because he's like, I was probably 11, 12 years old when it honestly happened. And, when you're a kid, you just kind of like want to keep playing, and then you do, and then it doesn't really heal the way that it's supposed to. And then by the time he said he was 16, 17, there was so much cartilage damage to his knee that it was practically gone. And when he started playing football, like that's when he really started feeling it. So they did a short-term fix, if you will, surgery for him when he was a senior in high school. And he missed his senior year of high school. I believe redshirted his first year at Nevada and then started for a couple of years after that. And then before this past season, they did a more long-term fix for his knee issue, which was they put more cartilage into his knee. It's the big question mark with that is I believe it was cartilage from, I think just somewhere, like not cartilage that he had in his own body. It was from somewhere else. And it was, okay, well, is the body going to accept this? Is it going to heal around it? Is it going to grow? And it did with him. So the thing is that, yeah, we talk about his knee injury, and I think that it is going to be something that NFL teams really take into account. But, I mean, the knee checkout was great at the Senior Bowl. It didn't get flagged as like a major issue at the combine from anything that I heard. I didn't hear anything bad about it. In fact, the medical rechecks, I think everything looks good for him. And he was telling me that this surgery that he had this past time to be more of a long-term fix should actually mean that like he's pretty much good to go. Now he'll probably obviously wear the knee brace, and it's not like he's going to become a super mobile quarterback now, but at least he won't be somebody who is like a depreciating asset like a car is the second you drive it off the lot, right? We draft this guy and all of a sudden the stock's going down and it's like it's losing value. It's a ticking time bomb, if you will. I don't think that's the case with him anymore. And then when you kind of check that box, you look at his tape and you look at his arm strength and you go, okay, this kid can play. And that's why I have him as of right now in my top 3 quarterbacks. So I agree with you. And I think that goes into it.
That's a great insight into Carson Strong for a lot of our viewers and listeners out there. We got to talk about everybody's quarterback one, Malik Willis out of Liberty, big play guy. How can he improve on taking those short dump offs and those easy reads as opposed to always going for the big play? Can that be coachable?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I haven't seen an offensive line for a highly touted draft eligible quarterback play as poorly as Liberty's offensive line was in a long time. Like they over the last 2 years, Liberty's offensive line has quite simply not been good enough for Malik Willis to even really get better. And that's just kind of that's the fact. Has Malik Willis gotten better? A little bit, but people bring up the Lamar Jackson comparison because they both got cannon arms and they both had rushing mobility. Lamar Jackson was so far ahead of where Malik Willis is right now playing the quarterback position when he was coming out of Louisville. I mean, the guy obviously won a Heisman Trophy. He was a first-round draft pick. Malik Willis, it's going to go higher than Lamar Jackson went that year, which is kind of crazy. I mean, it said different quarterback classes, but yeah, it's going to be a process for Malik. The answer is yes. Can he figure it out? Yes, of course he can. And that's why I think a team is going to draft him high, but it's going to take time. And
you got to be patient with quarterbacks, man. I don't know why people don't realize that.
Well, I think they do. They just, franchises are desperate, man. They're just desperate. They're always desperate to get a quarterback. And I'm afraid for Malik Willis because I think he's an incredibly talented player. I think he's a great kid. I've gotten to interview him a couple of times. He's awesome. I think he's got all the talent in the world. But if you throw him out there year one and have him go from that Liberty offense to the NFL offense, and your offensive line isn't good in the NFL, there's a chance that you might ruin this dude. And that is just what I do not want to see. And so I want Malik Willis to not play I don't want him to start a single game next year. And that has nothing to do with how good I think Malik Willis is. I want him to sit back and learn because I want to watch Malik Willis for the next 10 years, not just the next year coming up. So that's kind of where I am with him.
Yeah, he's got to go to a team which has a decent pass protectors. Yes. We saw that with Tua Tagovailoa in Miami. Now everybody's saying, is he the guy? Is he not the guy? But that's a whole nother debate for another day. I've been seeing some stuff about Kenny Pickett having some type of quote unquote unconventional and elongated way of throwing the ball, kind of like some of the concerns people had about Justin Fields last year about that little umbrella U shape, how he motioned to throw the ball. What's like the easiest way to describe that to, everybody. And is it a concern for NFL teams?
I don't think it's too much of a concern. I think the bigger concern is obviously the ball security when it comes to the hand size of Pickett. 8.5-inch hands. Like, I mean, let's just face it, it's the 0th percentile. Nobody in the NFL is a quarterback who has hands
Yeah.
that small, and I think there's a reason. I think the bigger issue, the throwing motion isn't. Yeah, I guess you want to be able to get it out of his hand as quickly as possible. And Justin Fields has kind of been working on that as well. But a lot of guys do. A lot of guys tweak the throwing motion a little bit throughout the early parts of their career. So that's not really uncharacteristic. The issue with me with Pickett is simply, what he was able to do in Pittsburgh. It's not going to fly on a play-by-play basis in the NFL. Like, you could see sometimes where Pickett's dropping back like 7-9 steps in the pocket.
Yeah.
Like he's bailing and rolling out. And it's just like, you can't do that in the NFL. It's just not going to work for you. You have to operate a little bit more under the pocket and within the structure. And you, of course, love it when guys can make plays out of structure. But the way that he made plays were almost Madden-like. You know how you hike the ball and you drop back like 15 feet and then you're still like looking down the field and then you'll scramble to the left or right, depending on.
You saw the bowl game too. You saw the bowl game when he made that play too. It was like, what in the world?
That was actually pretty. Yeah, that was pretty great. But so that's my biggest concern with Pickett is when those things aren't available, when the speed of defensive linemen get up the lot. Is he still going to be able to operate the way that he needs to? And I think that he's got great tape. I know a lot of people call him a one-year wonder, and so be it. But look, I also don't want to take that 1 year away from him. And that 1 year is the most recent year. So if you're going to trust anything about Pickett, you would trust what he has done most recently. So, like, I get the concerns, I hear him, but I still think he's a good quarterback prospect.
Yeah, before we get away from the quarterback draft class and into some Dolphins stuff, what are your thoughts on Bailey Zappe?
Dude, I like him, man. It's certainly a really comfortable, friendly system for him. Zach Kittley is his offensive coordinator there at Western Kentucky, and he was also Bailey Zappe's quarterback coach when he was at Houston Baptist before he transferred over to Western Kentucky. And so he has been running the Zach Kittley offense for 3 straight seasons. Jerris Stearns was also at Houston Baptist. And so both of those guys, along with the offensive coordinator, went over to Western Kentucky. So this has been 3 years in the making. It really has. And obviously, I got to sit down and talk with him too. And yeah, he talked about how fun that offense was and how free he was and just able to make so many great decisions. And
how it's throwing an arm, man.
Dude, he does have a good arm. I think the arm is underrated. It's not Willis. It's not Strong. It's not, I would even say Corral. I think that it's probably less than those guys, but it's capable, I think, of playing in the NFL. So I think that he'll be a mid-round pick to some team, probably early day 3, but he'll get his name called.
So the Miami Dolphins, after a trade with the San Francisco 49ers last year, highly debatable if they should have done that or not. They got Jalen Waddle. The 49ers got Trey Lance and new head coach, Mike McDaniel. It seems like San Fran and Miami have a bit of a love story going on recently. So who will the Dolphins pick at 29? Like, have you heard anything from the league? Like, what's going on?
Well, it's hard because when you pick that late in the draft, I mean, it's hard to say like, oh, the Dolphins are looking at Kenyon Green, or like, oh, the Dolphins are looking at Zion Johnson, and it's like,
you're like, hey, they'll be long gone,
right? It's like, yeah, I bet they are. They're also gonna look at them as they walk across the stage for different teams because they're not gonna make it.
You got Anthony saying Christian Watson at 29.
So I mean, I think there's a lot of options. I think offensive line's obviously first and foremost. You look at how poorly Miami was able to block last season, whether it was run blocking or pass blocking, and it simply was not good enough. And so, if you get an offensive lineman there, a Bernard Raymond, if you like Darian Kennard enough, I don't think Tyler Linderbaum's going to last that long, but I don't know how early the.
What about Tulsa's Tyler Smith?
So I think that Tyler Smith would also be a really great pick. I know that people are worried about him being the next like Isaiah Wilson or something. Just this big, powerful brute guy who just didn't pan out. And I was able to interview and sit down with Tyler not too long ago and loved his mentality, man. I mean, like, this kid, he's awesome. He's got the mentality that you want. Yes, he's inexperienced. He's actually only played offensive line for 5 years. One of them was a redshirt year, so it wasn't even starting. You played 2 years of high school, redshirted 1 year at Tulsa, and then had the 2 years of him being a starter. So he has not played the position very long. The hands are low. The footwork isn't exactly what it needs to be. Just the strike timing is off with him, but he also recognizes that. And I think that he he understands that where he needs to get better, if you will. He's working on it. He's working with former players and current players and everything like that. So I love the strength and mentality of the athleticism he has. So I think he should definitely be an option for them if he is still on the board there. And that's kind of I think that offensive line's got to be the top priority there for them if they can get their hands on it.
Yeah, and I last week I had Cole Strange on in the pod. I got a chance to interview him. Great guy, man. Love the kid. And I was saying, dude, like, if you are on the Dolphins, you got to know that zone scheme. And one play he told me was Bronco. It was basically wide zone all the way to the left. And he was telling me some of the challenges he faced at the Senior Bowl. It's just that communication, because he played along that Chattanooga line for 3 years with that left tackle, guard, and center. There's just that combination. He was saying, I knew exactly what to do. And when I got to the Senior Bowl, it was a little bit of kinks I had to work through in communication.
Right.
I'm like,
right.
These are some of the things that players have to get accustomed to. You're not in college anymore. You don't know these people. It's basically a brand new team. That's the thing I really liked about the Senior Bowl. Like, they try to get these kids accustomed to the NFL game. Now, people are saying that Miami should pick the best wide receiver available. And we have one here from JP at 29. Burks, Pickens, or Christian Watson?
I think of the three, you would probably go in the order of Burks, Watson, and then Pickens. At least that's what I think the NFL would do. Like, I think that if Burks is on the board, they would take him first. I think they would take Watson second, and then I think they would take Pickens third. But these are all wide receivers that I think would be really great options for them. I know that Burks didn't exactly blow up the combine like a freak or an alien or whatever you want to call it with athletic testing, but he's still really great. And I still think that he's going to go top 25 before the Dolphins end up picking. I love George Pickens. I mean, George Pickens was I remember I have an NFL draft podcast called NFL Stock Exchange with Connor Rogers. Him and I do it 3 times a week. And we were doing our wide receiver ranking episode. When was this? This had to be end of January, I think, right around the time of the Senior Bowl. And I had George Pickens number 2. I had him as my wide receiver 2. I have Drake London at wide receiver 1, and I had Pickens at wide receiver 2. And people were like, what are you talking about? They're like, nobody's talking about George Pickens. How do you have him at 2? This is absolutely ridiculous.
Outside of his injuries, I mean, he played phenomenal, dude.
He dominated as a freshman, dominated as a sophomore, came back at the back end and played the most important games for Georgia, came back, played it well. It's not his fault they don't pass the ball well. And when they did pass the ball to him, he was bailing him out. And then he comes up to the combine. He's big, he's strong, he's fast, he's quick. He's everything, man. I think he has X potential as a true wide receiver 1 in the NFL. So I think all those picks, going back to the original question, would be really great for the Dolphins, especially since they've added the speed with Jalen Waddle and Wilson now in free agency. Go get yourself a more strong stud, kind of a bigger framed contested catch wide receiver. But hey, with all 3 of those guys, you're also getting more than just contested catches too.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of yak. I mean, all these guys can run really, really well too. And I was thinking, we could go offensive lineman with the first pick, then second pick, wide receiver. There's a lot of good wide receivers this year as well. But I got some word that Miami could be looking at an edge guy. It's huge, fantastic edge. And a couple names that have been floated around is Houston's Logan Hall, Oklahoma's Perrion went free. I know Jermaine Johnson's name was floated around, but he's going to be gone. Like, he's long gone. He's going to be long gone. He's going to be long gone. Who are some of your, edge rusher guys that could fit for Miami?
Yeah, so I mean, it obviously kind of depends what formation they want to run in. If they're kind of sticking to that 3-3-4 style and they're going more of a stand-up 2-point stance rusher on the outside, I think 2 guys that would be on my radar at 29. Boye Mafe, the edge rusher from Minnesota, had a really great Senior Bowl. Showed up at the combine. I think ran very well. Big, long, sort of smaller edge rusher, but not really. I mean, at his pro day, he showed up at 257, and that's a pretty dang good weight.
Yeah.
And he jumped 41.5 inches in the vert. So that tells you the explosiveness that this guy has, vert and broad. That's not just about how high you can get in the air. That tests explosiveness. It tests the front part, the head of your quads, if you will, right around where the kneecap is, which is where you get all your power when you are bursting out of your stance, when you are getting from 0 to 30, right? When you're doing that, when you're doing that from acceleration to top speed kind of progression. And so that just shows you how powerful this guy is getting out of his stance as a speed rusher. So you love that. Another guy who's very similar in that regard, Arnold Ebiketie, the pass rusher from Penn State. These two dudes, similar mold. They give you that 2-point stance, stand up outside linebacker kind of pass rush profile. And I think if that's what you're going for, obviously they brought back Emmanuel Ogbah. I think that one of those two guys at 29 would be a really great speed complement to what they already have.
Now, this was like I was along the lines of Cameron Thomas from San Diego State University, because I didn't know if Ogbah would actually be here, because I see him as a similar type of mold to Emmanuel Ogbah. And what do you think about Thomas and his fit within this defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it just depends how much of a speed, the strength profile you might want from your edge guys. And I think that they already have the strength profile with Ogbah playing as like the Sam linebacker is the outside linebacker. So I think that they would want more of a lighter guy. Like I think that they would, and Thomas is good. Like I know a lot of people like Thomas as kind of an interesting day 2 pick that you take a chance on, but I would go for those other speed guys when it comes to fit for the Dolphins.
Of course. If you were general manager Chris Grier, who would you pick at 29?
Obviously
Put your GM hat on, man.
Yeah. So they're put the GM hat on. So I mean, it's obviously kind of like we said before. It's tough because 29, you don't exactly know who's going to be there. I think offensive line, you never want to force anything. But I think offensive line does have to be first and foremost for you. If there's a viable offensive line pick, you've got to make it happen. I even like Darian Kennard, man. I really do. And I
like
brought
him
them
right
up
tackle.
like Kennard being able to play. It's maybe a pick at 29. Maybe you trade down a little bit and you can get Kennard at the beginning of the second round, something like that. Raymond is somebody who's a former tight end, still learning the game of football, super athletic, showed that he was really strong as well at the combine. I think that he's another guy who, if you are going to do more of that zone approach, moving the line of scrimmage as Mike McDaniel might do from his time in San Francisco, you're going to need athletes on the line of scrimmage. And I think that Raymond gives you a really good profile for that. So, man, I think that you got to look offensive line first. I'd probably look wide receiver next, and then edge rusher, depending on how I felt about those two guys that I named.
Edge linebacker, maybe like a Chenal, Muma, Troy Anderson type of player.
Yeah, but I think that you can get, unless you're picking Devin Lloyd or Nakobe Dean at 29, then I think you can wait a little bit. Like you don't have to, I don't think you've got to pick Muma at 29. For as much as I like some of those guys that you named, the like tier 2, tier 3 linebacker.
Yeah, within the second, third round,
Right. Like after Nakobe Dean and Devin Lloyd, like it's pretty deep. You got a lot of guys that you could pick from there. So I would not be forcing a linebacker pick outside of Dean or Lloyd at 29.
Of course. And before we let you go, we have a word from our sponsor, Prize Picks. Use the promo code 5 to get a 100% match on your deposit. Again, Prize Picks code is 5. Trevor, what's on deck at PFF and for the draft?
Dude, we're pedal to the metal at this point in the year. We've got all sorts of mock drafts coming out. We're gonna, now that free agency's over, we're gonna get into some team centric mock drafts, some 3-round, 5-round, 7-round stuff for a lot of different teams. 3 days a week, myself and Connor Rogers on the NFL Stock Exchange.
I don't like podcast. Connor. He's a Jets fan, man.
We're I know, but he also knows the Dolphins very well from that regard. And so we're doing a lot of fun, having a lot of big mock drafts. We're having a guest mock draft series where we're also having guest pickers kind of come on over the next month and a half, which will be a lot of fun. And so just a lot of stuff over at pff.com and then that podcast there.
Of course. Trevor, thank you so much for coming on. Any last words for Dolphins fans?
I really want Tua to work out. That is my last word for Dolphins fans. I like Tua a lot. I would love for him to work out. I truly hope that this is the best year yet for Tua Tagovailoa. But if not, we know that Miami is always willing to get crazy when it comes to the NFL draft. So that helps me out as well when Miami's in that situation. So I guess it's a win-win for me either way. But I'm hoping that this is Tua's best year because I think it'll be a lot of fun for him.
Of course. Well, Trevor, we'll have you on soon as well. Maybe potentially after the draft's a little bit of a recap. as well. Here at the Five Reasons Sports Network, and especially here at the Scouting Combine, we'll be talking about running backs next week, and we have a pretty special guest that you guys will potentially like. Thank you guys for watching the Scouting Combine. You guys have a great rest of your weekend.